This is Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein, and today we're going to talk about choice of forum clauses, also called forum selection or choice of venue. I'm going to explain it, talk about why it's important, and what you need to watch out for. So what is a choice of forum or venue selection clause? This is something in some kind of contract or other legal agreement where you and the other party agree to the location of where you're going to settle a dispute. So we're talking about typically a court system, and we're talking about the physical location. Are you going to settle the dispute in the court system of California, of Canada, of the EU, of New York? And you can even get really specific. So it's not just California, but Santa Clara County. You're not just talking about location, though. You're also talking about which court system. In some places, there might only be one court system. But for example, here in the United States, here in California, you could be in federal court, because the United States is a federal system, which means there's courts that cover the entire United States. Or you could be in courts of the state of California, which here would be Superior Court. There's even a third option of courts, which is small claims court. In the United States, we have courts that specifically deal with small disputes, like things that are under $5,000 in most jurisdictions. Also, you even have another option, which is arbitration. I'm going to talk about arbitration in a completely different video because that can get complicated, but the idea of arbitration is it's a place to settle your dispute that's not a court system, part of any country, part of any government. It is actually a private system where you just pay money for a judge, who may be the same judge that you would normally use, to litigate your dispute privately out of court. So why are choice of forum clauses important? So the idea is here, you and another party have some kind of contract. And if anything goes wrong, you want to be able to pick where that dispute is going to be decided. Number one, you want something that is convenient to you so you can save time and money in litigating it. If you're here in California, you don't want to have to settle a dispute in the EU, maybe not even in New York City, especially right now during a pandemic. You'd much rather have a dispute be settled close to home. Also, you're saving an expense because you don't have to fight about where this case is going to be litigated. Part of what can happen in a lawsuit is that you file a lawsuit here, they want to file a lawsuit there, and then you end up having to pay a bunch of lawyers to dispute where the case should be heard, when really you should be only spending money on actually deciding the case. So an important question to ask is, will a court actually enforce your forum selection or venue selection clause in your contract? The thing is, you cannot make a court do something. So every court is going to be able to make an independent decision as to whether or not it is appropriate for them to hear it or for another court to hear it. So what can happen is you may file the action in one state, in California, let's say, even though the forum selection clause says it should be heard in New York. Now, California court is going to look at that forum selection clause and really consider it as being very important. However, perhaps that court is going to say there's a huge California public policy consideration that we want to have this dispute heard here. Maybe you're a resident of California. That's why you filed it here, even though the clause said New York, and California has an interest on its residents, especially in particular issues. For example, let's say your contract is an employment contract and it has a covenant not to compete, which are not enforceable in California except under very limited circumstances. In that case, the California court might say, we have a huge public policy interest in this dispute and we're not going to send it to New York. Another case to consider are adhesion contracts. These are contracts where you didn't actually negotiate the contract. It was just given to you and your choice was to either sign up for that service or buy that product or not. For example, let's say when you park your car in a parking lot and they have something on the back of the ticket that says exactly what the rules are and the contract is that you're agreeing to. you don't get to negotiate that with the parking lot place. Your choice is to just not park there. And when you put forum selection or venue selection clauses in those kinds of contracts of adhesion, then you need to pick somewhere that's really fair. If you're trying to just like force some weird jurisdiction on those people who are signing up for your product or service, and so it makes it so burdened they can't ever file a lawsuit against you, a court may not enforce that forum selection clause because it is inherently unfair.
Okay, so we're going to go over the terms of service for YouTube, since it obviously applies to all of you because you're here watching this video, and see what their choice of forum or choice of venue happens to be. So this is the terms of service for YouTube. One thing to watch out is sometimes there's different terms of service that applies to you in different countries. It depends if that website has different versions that are available in different countries, and also the terms may just say that this applies to people in the United States or the EU, etc. Or even states in the United States, like California, might have special terms. So scrolling down, typically the choice of law, choice of forum, all that kind of stuff is going to be way down in the bottom in the legalese. I'm just going down to past terminations, other legal terms. Okay, now we're getting into business. So down here in governing law, it says that all the claims in this will be governed by California law and will be litigated exclusively in the federal courts or state courts of Santa Clara County, California. Santa Clara County, California, by the way, is where the headquarters of Google and YouTube are located. It's in the Silicon Valley near San Francisco, for those of you who don't know. This is something to watch out for, is that a lot of times choice of venue, choice of forum terms will be inside the choice of law clause. So this is talking about governing law, but it actually is also talking about what venue or forum you will be subject to. So the next agreement I wanted to look at was Microsoft's. Now, this is a good example of how they have different terms depending upon where you're located. So this is if you or the principal place of business of your company is in the United States, this certain clauses apply to you. Specifically, arbitration is what's going to apply to you. So Microsoft Service Agreement, blah, 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 all kinds of stuff is in here that we're all agreeing to if we use Word or whatever other Microsoft application you might be using. So all kinds of stuff goes down here. Now we're getting into contracting entity, choice of law, choice of jurisdiction. So choice of law, place to resolve disputes, is if you're in the United States, then the laws of the state in which you live govern all claims. So if you're here in California, it's California law. If you're in New York, it's New York law. Except the Federal Arbitration Act governs arbitration. So arbitration, as I said, was about if you have a case, you're not hearing it in government court, you're hearing it in a private court that you have to pay for, or the other side has to pay for. It goes into a little bit more detail than that. So they consent, and we consent, to jurisdiction and venue in the state or federal courts of King County, Washington, except for things that are in arbitration or small claims court. Kings County, Washington is where their headquarters, of course. So this is something I wanted to show you, because if you're a business owner and you do business with people all over the United States or all over the world, you may want to put in different options for people to explore. It makes it more likely that your clause will be respected by a court, especially if you're doing business with people where they're not spending tons of money with you. And this isn't a negotiated dispute. So the dispute might be over $50 or $500 or something that's relatively small compared to lawsuits in court. All right, so they have specific terms for all their different services. And then we're gonna keep going down. Okay, so binding arbitration and class action waiver. So I'm going to do something separate about in more detail on arbitration and also more detail about class actions. But what this says is that if you are buying some product or using an Xbox or whatever with Microsoft, you're going to be subject to arbitration if you're here in the United States, except you have an option for small claims court. So here, instead of doing their whole arbitration thing, you can actually file a small claims court suit where you're located or where they're located. This is a great option to have in your choice of forum clause in your contracts if that makes sense for you. If you have a lot of transactions that are relatively small, if they're under $5,000, it makes sense to do that in small claims court. You usually don't have a lawyer except in certain specific jurisdictions like Louisiana. It's something that's relatively short time frame. It only takes a month, 2 months, something like that to completely resolve the dispute and be before a judge. It's a great way to deal with smaller disputes. But you can also do arbitration with them. And one of the things that Microsoft does too is you don't just file an arbitration suit against them, you send them a notice and it actually gives them the opportunity to settle this out of arbitration or out of court. This promotes efficiency. So I recommend that looking at how big companies like Microsoft, YouTube, etc., how they set up their dispute resolution system is a way for you to figure out new options for your business.
So my tip for you today is to always check the form or venue selection clause in a contract. It might be hidden. It might be actually under a choice of law clause. So you might not be able to just scan down the titles of sections, but a lot of times it's going to be there. And if you're negotiating a contract, if you're a business owner and you're drafting a contract, you want to think about where would you want this dispute to be held? What's convenient for you and what is going to be enforceable in a court of law. Again, this is Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein. If you have any questions about forum or venue selection clauses, please go ahead and ask them below in the comment section. And of course, if you've found this video useful or helpful to you, I'd love it for you to like the video and subscribe to this channel to get more explainers and tips. Thanks a lot, you guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.